And I believe this is one
Correct.
that you actually wrote up at RT. And Ohio
Yes.
County Elections Board confirms mailing 500,000 or 50,000, excuse me, wrong ballots denies Trump's rigged race claim. And the reason I find this story interesting, Will, isn't necessarily these particular 50,000 ballots in Ohio, but just that this is probably something that's happening in Ohio, and then there's 50,000 ballots in other states and like other little districts, and so I assume this is just one event of many. And I want to talk a little bit about it because obviously this is really complicated for something that a lot of the country, a lot of the Americans see as extremely important, and they put all their faith in the integrity of our elections. And this certainly makes it seem like maybe there's this isn't going so well. So Will, tell us about this particular incident in Ohio.
Yeah, sure. So this we're talking about a county elections board in Ohio that came out on Friday, I think, and it basically had to admit they were forced to admit that nearly 50,000 ballots were sent out, or excuse me, 50,000 incorrect ballots were sent out to voters across this county. And Franklin County in Ohio is the like seat of the state capital. It's like the most populous county, so it is like a major district in Ohio. And so we're not talking about like 50,000 ballots in just some like relatively small town, so that like the whole population of a small town or something. But nonetheless, that is still a pretty significant number that we're talking about here in terms of like erroneous ballots, where they were either sent to just like the wrong address or they were sent to people for the wrong congressional race in the wrong precinct. Um, but yeah, I mean, you have tens of thousands of these ballots going to the wrong houses, basically. And apparently, the elections board tried to explain this. They're saying that somebody pressed a wrong button. They put the wrong setting on a machine that like packs the ballots into envelopes. So that's sort of their explanation. And they claim they were going to be able to correct this within 72 hours and get all the correct ballots sent out to all the right addresses. But I'm kind of skeptical that they'll have this all sorted out in that time. I mean, we're talking about like this is 20% of the ballots in total that they mailed out so far in this county. And now we have tens of thousands of these ballots out there, which seems to maybe create the potential for fraud. Like if you have these things floating around, you might have some people going and trying to fill out both. They receive two ballots and they might try to fill one out and submit them at different polling stations or whatever.
Well, and
And
then
oh, go ahead.
what happens if somebody just gets confused and sends in the wrong ballot? I know, a lot of people, at least especially my millennial friends, definitely don't check their mailbox every day. Maybe once a week. And so if you just get two ballots in the mail, what if you fill out the wrong one and send that one back in? It seems like there's gonna be a lot of issues with everybody having two ballots and one being incorrect, especially when a lot of Americans just don't pay that close attention to news, especially local news. And if you don't know this is going on, what's their plan? Are they gonna go knock on all the doors and try to get back these 50,000 ballots or something?
Yeah, I mean the county they claim they have some kind of like they said they have strong measures in place to like ensure that like people aren't double voting. Like you said, it might not be fraud, it might just be an accident or people are confused about how to do this. Because like this is getting a little complicated now. You have two ballots and you're not quite sure which one is the correct one. But I'm forgive me if I'm a little skeptical that their strong measures will prevent all of these from will sort this whole thing out. You may have a lot of people, you may have thousands of people who end up trying to vote and their vote is invalid, and then you might also have the potential for people who do end up voting twice and the system doesn't catch them, and so like you do sort of have like whether it's fraud or not, you do have sort of this anomaly where some people might be voting twice. So some might not vote at all, and some might end up voting twice. And so, like, I think some of the claims about like the a fraud in mail-in voting might be a little over the top, like the claims that it's just going to be like a totally garbage result in the election. But I do sort of think like it's ridiculous that you can't even raise the possibility that there might be some problem with like universal mail-in voting. Like we are starting to see these problems crop up. 50,000 ballots in this, Ohio County, 50,000 ballots in another county. Like before you know it, you are talking about significant numbers of people whose vote either is like fraudulent or invalid in one way or another. And so I think it is valid to raise some possible concerns about universal mail-in the system.
Yeah, I mean, there's been plenty of examples, especially these swing states. I believe I've actually lived in Missouri in '08 with McCain and Obama was decided by tens of thousands of votes. And then the last time around, New Hampshire was decided by I think under 10,000 votes, but definitely under 20,000. So like, these elections could be within, this margin right here, this 50,000 number. And so I think it's, again, especially if this is just one example of many, it's going to cast a lot of doubt on the outcome of the election. Now, I guess if it's a landslide where every state is won by several million votes and a 10% margin, this may not turn out to be such a big deal. And my particular concern isn't even like we need to have free and fair elections and that kind of thing. But if people don't feel like the elections are fair, then I'm guessing we're going to see a lot of like protesting that will probably turn into rioting, depending on whose side wins or loses. And this is something, to talk about and say like, hey, we have this real problem with mail-in voting. And also, I read like 2 million people have already voted now, Will. So, let's not even say there's a problem with the ballots or something, but just that, somebody drops off of the ballot in that time. We've talked in the past how, we have old presidential candidates. Everybody knows Joe Biden's in bad health. Most of the people I talk to who are voting for him don't really expect him to make it through the first term. So I don't know if you have any idea the answer to this question, Will, or if this is maybe just a complete hypothetical, but something we should really consider. If Joe Biden is unable to make it to the election day, and Kamala Harris then maybe becomes the nominee, what happens to all those ballots of people who voted for Joe Biden to be president? That seems to be a real question mark and a mystery.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure. Like, I would assume that, like, I mean, I guess that in the case that he becomes incapacitated, I know the parties have like some procedure where they pick a new nominee, but I'm not sure if that would result in the election because this is like the 11th hour now. Like at that point, it might be so late that they would have to delay the election or something, and at that point, they may start trying to figure out how to get those other people who already voted to be able to vote again. But I really don't know how that would work. That certainly would be like a real disaster scenario. But even short of that, I mean, like people have already been talking about this election being resolved in a courtroom because of all this mail-in voting stuff and the complications that could cause. Like the ballots. I think some people are talking about they may take longer to count. This could be like a long and dragged out process where one of the other candidate may be able to dispute it sort of and say like, hey, something's not on the up and up here. I mean, we already had Hillary Clinton suggesting that Biden should not concede under any circumstances and that he should be putting together I think she called a massive legal operation to like fight this in court in case he does lose. And I think she actually said Biden was already doing that, putting together that legal team. So that's not just her idea. So I do just think there is some real trouble we could see with this type of system. Whether, like you're saying, if the candidate becomes incapacitated, that's a big deal. A lot of people have already cast their ballots. But even short of that, there's all kinds of complications we could see with this.